He was born in 1433 in a small town in the Arno Valley in Tuscany, Filine. He moved to Florence as a boy when his father was appointed to the hospital there and as physician to the foremost citizen of Florence, Cosimo de' Medici. Marsilio was schooled in Latin and in the traditional studies of philosophy and science based upon Aristotle. But he became a keen admirer of Plato through such material as was available. Recognizing his abilities, Cosimo arranged for him to learn Greek, and in 1462 gave him a Greek codex containing the whole of Plato's writings, many of which were previously unknown in the West. He charged him with the task of translating it. This was the beginning of a long relationship with Plato and with the Medici. Diverted from his career in medicine, though never forgetting his roots, Ficino worked steadily through all the dialogues of Plato and, in order to understand them and make them live, he also read the works of Plato's later interpreters, a vast body of challenging Greek texts that very few people had studied before him. The first group of Plato's dialogues were completed before Cosimo died, 10 of them, even though the task was interrupted at Cosimo's request in favor of a new manuscript containing previously unknown works of Hermes Trismegistus. Ficino continued to write translations and commentaries for the next 35 years, and was still writing in the last years of his life, even though his health and eyesight were failing. The letters are the most obvious starting point. There are 9 volumes already in print, and the 10th is almost ready. You could begin anywhere with these, but many people like to start at volume 1, in which there are many beautiful and inspiring pieces. And of course, you can take the letters one at a time. His treatise on love, an imaginative response to Plato's Symposium, has been in English for a long time. And most of his other Plato commentaries are now available too. So is his landmark labor, the 18-book Platonic Theology. But the letters give a good introduction to all this. We never cease to be amazed by the number of people who find our translations of the letters helpful, both ordinary readers and academics. I joined the group working on an English translation in the school 40 years ago. In that time, not only has my interest grown, but Ficino's name has increased from being hardly known to being a highly valued resource for people interested in philosophy, art, and literature, as well as health, music, and the language of prayer. Ficino continues to appeal not just to the learned. His letters, which are the most readily approachable of his works, have a much wider following. Plato's writing has been a great source of inspiration because it takes the reader beneath the surface of everyday life. Not only is it beautifully written, but it's based on a process of questioning, of stripping away answers that do not satisfy until one arrives at a point where inquiry can rest, even if many of the big questions in life remain just that, questions. This seems to me a very compelling approach, and Ficino appears to have found likewise. Plato himself never put forward a system for explaining metaphysical matters, but of course our minds naturally look for system. We want to understand principles and origins. We like to see the connections between things. So people have always looked for a system in Plato, reading between the lines and connecting one inquiry with another. One of the things that helped Ficino tremendously was discovering the Neoplatonists. Plotinus and those who followed were system builders and were interpreting Plato in a way that fitted harmoniously with Christianity, even though they themselves were not Christian. Their approach emphasized the rational in a way that did not conflict with the spiritual. In fact, Ficino became convinced that religion and philosophy were two streams flowing from a single source. So he was able to achieve for himself, for his generation, and for those that followed, a deeply inspiring synthesis of philosophy and religion. In Florence, he was surrounded by people who came to hear him speak, to learn with him, to discuss, or sometimes just to be restored by his company. Ficino used the power of words and music, as well as herbs and medicines, to restore well-being. His circle of friends in the city included the political elite, prosperous merchants, men of the church, high and low, aspiring writers and artists. Before long, he also had friends all over Italy, Germany, and France, and further afield, even though he himself never travelled further from Florence than the Tuscan hills. His translations, his own writings, his teaching, and his letters ensured the Platonic thought became fully available to anyone who could read Latin. And this helped to inspire that flowering of literature, philosophy, and art that we know as the Renaissance. In time, his writings were also translated so they could spread more widely into Italian, French, German, and Czech. Among the men who came under his direct influence were some of the most brilliant figures of the age: Lorenzo de' Medici, Poliziano, Pico della Mirandola, Pietro Bembo, and many others. Among the artists, Botticelli, Michelangelo, Raphael, Titian. Among teachers, John Colet, who founded St. Paul's School in London, setting education on a whole new basis. Among poets, the list is endless, but I've found unmistakable traces in our own Edmund Spenser, in Shakespeare, and of course in the great transcendentalist writers of America who gathered round Emerson. Some of the contemporaries he influenced he never even met, but entered into correspondence with them. Several popes and cardinals, the King of Hungary, members of the French court. His letters are addressed to over 200 people. They were collected and published in 1495, and a second printing followed just 2 years later. I've come to appreciate more and more what an incredible contribution he made, and I continue to be inspired by his words and by his concerns that are so very close to our own interests today.